Alrighty, so for Learn Together Week 14, the week I hope that you're working on your Develop It 4, the two parts are going to be covering refactoring some content from some of your code to implement what we learned in this last section for section 8. And the second part will be actually doing a review where you review the requirements in the video I've done for Develop It 4. And then I want you to write a short description of what you think you will do for this development requirement as far as you can actually more focus on the 20%. That's something I talk about there. But before we get into that, let me just show you, right? Basically, right, you're going to refactor your functions into arrow functions and shorten syntax where possible. Refactor existing code that is able to turn into ternary operators, conditional operators. Refactor your function to include a try catch, so you're handling errors on that. Implement strict mode, fix any errors that may have been caused because of that. And that's one thing I just did, so I'm actually going to fix that as we talk about it. And then in the comments, you can actually link to your commits. And this will actually just show us the code that you did. You don't have to do a print screen this week because we're not adding any functionality, but I do want you to just give us a link to your actual commits. Okay? So let me show you. I actually have it up. Oh yeah, here it is, right here. Okay, so actually you don't really see anything new here, right? So where you see something new is actually on the code. And this is where, as a matter of fact, let me just see. Let me actually just run through an example. Let me just actually put some data in so I can see if I have any errors, which by the way, and then I want to talk just a little bit about this in here, is that when you tell in the input, when you say text.number, the type.number, sorry, this limits the ability of users to only put numbers in, but the data actually most likely gets stored as strings. And we'll talk about how you can fix that, but let me just go ahead and, good, it worked, no, well, let me just, and the reason is I just implemented, let's see, I got no issues. So in this case, my code was written well, and I didn't have any issues as far as using just strict. So that should be fairly easy. So now let me just show you what I'm talking about here. When you look at your local storage, you can see for me, my kilowatts are actually being stored as strings. So if I want to do any kind of summary data, and you might think about how does this work, and the reason it works right now is because of coercion. It actually coerces this, right? So in this case, my code is depending on coercion, and maybe I don't want it to, right? Obviously, I probably wouldn't want to because then it's harder to maintain. So how do I convert these into numbers? Well, it's actually pretty simple. So let me actually show you in the code where you would do it. So where I get the data, so in this case, in this program, let me just go through and look at it real quick in my functions. Where am I doing the put? Oh, actually, I think it's in my app data right here, right? So in here, the date, but what I can do, and there are a couple ways to do this, and I'm actually going to give you a link to an article in a minute that you can actually, there's different methods you can use here to actually just convert that into an actual number if you want to use it later. Right? So let's see if just doing that, but now I actually have to enter some new data. So I'm going to have a mix of data that's got the old, if it works, and you can see right here, right? So you can see that in this case, now I'm going to have to look at my summary data for how it's working. Because it's saying there's 4 days over, oh, actually it did figure it out. So again, coercion and my summary did work, but I wouldn't want it to. I would actually want to fix that. And not only that, let's say if I wanted to do a total number here, right? That's why I would want this data stored as actual numbers so that it's easier for me, and it's better code to actually have it stored as number. Okay? Okay, so by the way, the link I'm going to give you in the write-up, because some of you actually run into this, and I'm guessing you may run into it again, especially on your next Develop It, is actually talking about the different ways you can actually do this, right? Converting a string to a number, right? So this is the method I used, but there is also just using parse int, parse float, the unary operator, which I have never used, so that's kind of a fun one where you actually, I think you're tricking it by using coercion to make it happen, math.floor. So I've given you this link in down here so that because you may run into this, like I said before, okay? So the other part too, so let's see, do I need to show you how to give a link to your commits? Let's just do it, okay, just in case. So if I go to my GitHub, and if I go to this course, 93, and if I go to my public, because again, you're only going to see these if you're under the public one, which mine is right here. Right, so in this case there's actually 10 commits. If you just click on commits here, you can actually look at the code, but it shows you, okay, here's the commits, and you can see, oh, I just deleted that file, which actually somebody was asking me, I think it was William, about how to just do some cleanup, and that's actually how I did it. If you're still having an issue, ask me about it. So this was, oh, so I may have not pushed my code yet. So here's where, yeah, I can see I set up the edit file, right? So this is the nice thing about just giving us a link to the commits on your public so that we can actually just go through and look at that a little easier. Okay, so now, so that's part one, right? So give us a link. You need to do refactor your code, add this new refactor using these new processes, these new functions that we have, and then provide us a link. So now for part two, I want you to look at the video I just created a few minutes ago for Develop It 4. What I've done so far, I have a little bit of work to do, but I've completed about 90% of what I needed to do for Develop It 4. And in there I talk about that 80% of your 80% of your grades are going to come from basically just re-implementing into your Develop It 3 what we've done for the last 3 Learn Togethers, right? Implementing those ideas. And then 20% is going to come from you adding functionality outside of the base requirement. All right, so in that case, I want you to think about this, and that's why I showed you how my kitty cat match, and this is my new one, has been modified for the Develop It 4 requirements. And I want you to think about what you're going to do here, right? Because you need to add some functionality beyond what we've learned in these 3 last weeks of doing section 1, or section 8, 1 and 2, and section 9. All right. So I want you to think about that, and really that's where I want you to hear you do some writing. So I want you to write a short description of what you think you will be doing for this development work, this additional 20%. Okay, and again, I've given you the link to the idea of how to convert strings into text if you need to do that. And the reason this is maybe timely is because of this functionality that you may be adding. And again, there's just a couple of you that ran into it. Okay, I think that should give you, now I actually haven't specified, right? So I want to see at least 150 words here and do your normal replies. That's what you need to do for this work. And then of course this is a perfect time, and that's why I want you to review this. I almost considered, and I think I will actually now that I'm talking about it, I actually want you to take notes on the Develop It 4 video that I did and add it to your notes in your private repo as part of that. So in your writing also say, yes, I updated my notes. And again, you wouldn't have to give us a link because those are really meant for just you and I, but in your work just tell me you did actually do those notes so I could just go look at them. Okay? Because here's the thing is I don't want students, because sometimes students are just like, hey, this is not required, and it's true. When it's optional, sometimes you don't do it, so I'm just making sure you're there. All right, so now where we're at is we're down to talking about our last Develop It, and I'm going to work on, that's one of the last, of course, the last Develop It, and then I'm actually going to go ahead and work through the 2 last sections and start thinking about the last 2 Learn Togethers, which I hope to have most of this done, or at least gone through before we break for Thanksgiving. All right, have a great one, and let me know if you need anything.